My name is Atif Kadir and I am the lab captain for Handson Lab HOL 220201. So today this is actually a guided workshop which is focused around getting started with vRealize Network Insight, and I'm going to be your host throughout this guided workshop. So we have an agenda. So I'll take you through all of those elements. So I'll introduce myself shortly. We will then go through the lab construction process, the lab build process. We will then touch on the lab experience in terms of experiencing what are the core artifacts that make up vRealize Network Insight. It's a very massive product that covers multiple personas inside a network stroke application stroke other functions, and then we will touch on the two modules that I've shortlisted because I can't cover all the lab in this one sitting. So as an introduction, my name is Atif Kadir. I'm a lead solution engineer focusing on network and security products linked to network and security business unit at VMware. I'm also a member of the CTO Ambassador Program, and I'm based in United Kingdom in West Yorkshire. So I've been with VMware for 6.5 years, and prior to that, I was actually a customer. I was the consumer of VMware products and other vendors, and now I'm actually on the technical pre-sale side, covering the global accounts. So this is my fourth year as a solo author for Handson Lab for vRealize Network Insight. And I have a huge passion for this product. And over time, I have influenced product and features into the technical product management, into the product management, and also echoing the customer's voice back to R&D as well at the same time. I'm absolutely passionate about the operations because coming from a customer background, I feel it's an absolute essential uh, element how you to keep your business online or keep the lights on. In other words, um, as a as a person outside work, I'm absolutely passionate about quadcopters, FPV flying, FPV racing. So I build my own quadcopters when I find time, and play with them basically. So the lab process. So this is actually quite a big lab in terms of its footprint, but it's quite a simple lab at the same time. What I mean by that is that what we did was that we hooked up all, connected all the sources to the vRealize Network Insight platform appliance by different data sources, and we pulled in all the telemetry, and then obviously those data sources were disconnected, right? So it's a point in time picture, but it is a live lab, right? So when we look at some of those objects, you may occasionally get that this data set is quite old. Don't worry about it. It's a point in time picture which gives you all the use cases that are captured in the lab manual. So in terms of the lab creation process, it's a very iterative process. It's a perpetual cycle where we go through very rigorous testing, and then we, as part of the testing, we also get proposed that why don't you do it this way? Why can you not introduce this function? Can you not talk about this feature? Right. So it's quite an iterative process when it comes to creating this lab, and then the idea is that as part of this continuous improvement, we can go beyond the VM world as well into our spring releases and other updates, because the post VM world, these labs go out into the public domain, which means that anyone can access these labs after VM world. So to make the lab uh, module selection simple, I've actually created this, your journey to lab, right? So I've created this categorization from a beginner, intermediate, and a pro, right? So you crawl, walk, run, or fly. And under no circumstances I'm saying that they are the perfect way of doing it, but this is how I feel. This is what I see when I speak to my customers. So for example, you may be well versed in the field of network insight, you understand what this whole uh, product is about already. So it means that you can just quickly jump on module 6 or module 7, and you don't have to worry about anything around the lab introduction or module 1. All of these modules are modular. There is no interdependency, so you can just pick up any module to start the topic of the choice, is what I'm trying to say. So you can use this as a guideline when you when you attempt this lab. So at the end of this presentation, I'm going to quickly touch on the module 2 and module 4 in terms of uh, what is application discovery, why is it important, and what are the key salient elements that we cover in the application discovery. And then we look at the network assurance and verification element. So I can't cover all the modules in this one sitting, so it is important that I cover some of my favorite ones and the most applicable ones that I see in the field, or are most asked by my customers and the customers I support. So just a quick high level view of what vRealize Network Insight. So vRealize Network Insight is all about operationalizing cloud, whether it's your private cloud or public cloud. And in when we talk about a data center is made up of physical layer, a lot of switches, routers, physical hardware, and then we call it the data center. But because we abstract everything on top of that, we call it SDDC. And your SDDC is made up of three main pillars, which is automation, business, and operations. Your SDDC consists of storage, compute, and network. We call it the private cloud, right? And then this is where vRealize Network Insight comes in. It covers the operational disciplines. It looks at the visibility control, and the remit is that it should be able to provide config and compliance and a consistent security posture and make your application discovery journey and a lot easier, right? And then what we can also do is we can actually have the network assurance and verification element built into that as well, that why can my communication path from this VM to this VM not complete because there is actually an ACL in between that physical network layer, right? So that is the network assurance and verification element, which is module 4 that I'll touch on at the end of this presentation. So what we do is to make that happen, we pull in the data from the compute landscape, we pull in the data from the network layer, we pull in the data from the physical layer as well. So you may have different switching vendors such as Cisco, Arista, Checkpoint. We pull in that telemetry from that perspective as well. We pull in the telemetry from different cloud providers as well, for the likes of VMware Cloud, for native AWS, or vice versa, right? And then what we do is, because we pulling in a lot of data set, we apply correlation and analytics, and then we synthesize that data. So network insight is a passive product, but by what I mean by passive is that we don't have a push button to say go out and fix my vendor 1 problem as well as vendor 2, vendor 3, and vendor 4. But what we can do is that we can actually target and understand where the problem lies, so we can take away a lot of blame game culture uh, in order to get to the root cause analysis, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. So that's what I mean by the passive nature of the product. So our data sources consist of flow data, right? So we rely heavily on the flow data, and that could be your vSphere distributed switch, that could be the net flow that's being pulled from the likes of Cisco or Arista or Juniper or vice versa, or other mainstream vendors that are out in the market. We can get richer data sets through SNMP, and then what we do is we execute read-only commands on the data sources, the switches, the routers that we pull in the telemetry from, right? So it's like show up, show me this table, and that gives us a richer context in terms of the throughput uh, that is configured on the switch port table and things like that. As a result of that, we get 360-degree visibility. We can plan micro-segmentation, which makes which is actually an attempt to make your journey to zero trust a lot simple and easier. And then we should be able to do troubleshooting end to end for all the data sources that we are pulling in, so that we can unravel what is happening in the world of this private cloud, or combination of private stroke public cloud as well at the same time. So this is what network insight is, right? So it's a beast of a product when it comes to the operational disciplines. So that takes us to the next bit, which is one of the module that we're going to cover, which is module 2, which is an application discovery. So when it comes to the application, the world of application is a complex world, because in a typical brownfield environment, what I tend to see is that organizations go through in-source, outsource activities, people move on, people you know change roles as well at the same time, and sometimes things like configuration management systems are not consistent, and when a merger happens, or something else happens, the customers would just leave that one virtual machine on, or one physical machine on, for the sake of it, because nobody knows that what's running on top of that. If they shut down virtual machine 1, it may impact virtual machine 2, 3, 4, or virtual machine n. So that whole notion of uncertainty and unknown behavior of that virtual machine hosting an application, or maybe there could be no application, is what makes the application world extremely complex, right? And that is the aim of network insight, to unravel all of that without the need of any agent, to understand that context around application mapping and that behavioral analysis on a perpetual basis, using machine learning and other techniques. So what we do is we can rely on the naming convention. If the naming convention that a customer is using is very robust and consistent, then why not, right? We can use the naming convention and do the discovery and the segregation based on that. For example, web hyphen data center 02 hyphen sequential number could be a naming convention, and that works, right? So we can use, there's a built-in regular expression that can actually help us to achieve that. We can pull in the configuration management information CIs from the ServiceNow as well, and look at those context profiles in terms of 10 of these VMs constitute towards an application, and then we can do the flow analysis against it in network insight to make sense of that information. We can do tag based discovery as well. If you've got good tagging hygiene, then that can happen as well. But in the absence of all of this blue, purple, and green tags, these, the machine learning is there, right? So machine learning is there in the absence of all of that, which is looking at granular level of detail to give you that view, and make it easy for you in terms of application dependency and mapping. So that is the flow based application discovery. And when we actually combine the flow based application discovery, we can unravel there are common services, for example ads consumed by the finance and marketing, irrespective of the naming convention, or there are DNS services that are being used. But then at the same time, what if there are any DNS servers which are using legacy operating systems, for example Microsoft Windows 2003, 2008? What if one of that machine is compromised from a security perspective, like a patch or a WannaCry type of attack? Could you secure it through NSX? Could would you understand that impact analysis? So this whole flow based application discovery takes away this hair scratching, in terms of what's happening. So I am now logged into my Handson Lab portal, and I started this lab, which is Handson Lab HOL 2202-01 CMP, which is getting started with vRealize Network Insight. And when you start the lab, you have the time remaining bar, and then your right hand side is the actual lab manual, the instructions, the exhibits that will follow, and on your left hand side is the actual working area, which is the control center. One thing to bear in mind is that for any Handson Lab, let alone for this particular lab, you should always make sure that the lab status is set to ready. So in this case, this is green. If you see anything in the red, then it means the services are being provisioned, the VMs are coming online, and other processes that may be happening behind the scenes. um, in the in the Handson Lab, you also have the readme the text file, which has the credentials as well at the same time. uh, Going through the table of contents, you can see that there are 8 modules, and we looked at the crawl, walk, run approach that I shared, but you can, of course, choose your own path when selecting a module. So for the purpose of this exercise right now, for the guided workshop, I'm going to select and talk about module 2 as well as module 4, which is application discovery and network assurance and verification, vice versa. I can expand my uh, contents as well, and then in the content, um, you can see actually it's quite an elaborative lab with different modules. So it'll be difficult for us to complete all of this in one sitting, but like I said before, this is actually a completely modular lab which you can always refer back to should you need it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on module 2 and click on the introduction, close this, and then open my web browser. When I open up the web browser, after the introduction, it basically will take you through the lab status check, takes you through opening the browser. So everything is detailed step by step, and this is actually consistent in every module, right? So that makes the lab modular, so that you know exactly where to start, where to click, and how to proceed with the next step. So I'm going to type in my credentials so I can log in, and whilst it's logging in, I will actually move on to the next step. So what we can also do is, if the image is small for you, so we can actually click on the image and look at what that image is, so that that exhibit is what you're going to really follow, right? So it should match. um, so um, so the lab is now loaded, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this first step, which is security planning. And in the security planning, I click on analyze, and when I click on analyze, I'm just going to close this panel because I know the steps, and you can do these steps in your own time as well. uh, so what we can going to do is we're going to just touch on this quickly. So basically our grouping is by VLAN, VXLAN, or overlay, and where it says overlay, it means it could be Geneva overlay. I'm going to switch gear and shift it to the application, right? So when you go into the application, the lab guide basically asks you to focus on the HR app, and I can do keep focus, and here we can actually see the communication paths from the HR app to physical infrastructure to shared physical. So it could be shared DNS servers, NTP services, common services, and then at the same time I can see there is things that are going out to the internet. I can see the HR app is communicating with uh, um, a, another application which is Fitbike AWS native. So it means that if this HR app is hosted on private on the private cloud, then it has connection space into the Fitbike AWS, which is a public cloud, right, in this case. And we can then the question comes in that how do you create these applications, how did they actually show up here in this security planner, right? And on your right hand side you've got your traffic distribution. So what we're doing is we are showing what is happening inside the vSphere distributed switch. So as such, in this particular data center, this example, your lab environment, 96% of the traffic is east-west, and we've got the distribution from a switch and routed perspective as well, where we can then analyze and say that, why have we got 15% routed and a lot of switched, or vice versa, and why shouldn't we not have the balance of switch and routed, right? So it all depends. uh, so we're going to switch gear and go into uh, applications. So when I click applications, it's going to load up another widget, a different type of UI, which basically shows you the same applications that you saw in that, donut or the pie chart, whatever you want to call it, in the security planner. So these are now displayed in a different form factor, which is, uh, in the beehive format. So the first thing we quickly check is that these are the same. So you can see the fun bike, the fit cycle, as well as, the HR app is there as well. So I can actually click on the HR app, and it'll show me that, the communication paths from the HR app to the other apps that are actually hosted here. So I can see the HR app is talking to uh, uh, HR app is talking to, big CRM, which is another application, or vice versa, right? But what I can quickly do is I'm going to undo the HR app, is by to quickly look at, these options. So highlight the applications with unprotected flows. So show me the applications in this view which have no, distributed firewall rules. Show me the applications which are talking to the internet. So I'm just clicking on this to see that which applications are talking to the internet, and we'll quickly see that, not all applications are talking to the internet, and again these lines represent the flows. And then I can actually see, highlight the applications with problems. So the problems could be that an application is traversing through a physical network infrastructure, and there may be, an MTU mismatch configuration or any other element around it as well at the same time, right? The question then comes in, is that how did we end up in a state where we have these applications, right? So what we can do is we click on discover, right? And when we click on discover, we have the uh, option to identify the applications by tags. We have the option to identify the application by service now. So if the service now is configured as a data source in Network Insight, then, we can actually see those CIs or those applications that are configured here as well at the same time, and then we can do some correlation and analysis. Um, if an application is saved, you would see, a green saved button. In this case, this 3-tier app 02 is not a saved application so far. We can then expand and look at, the uh, constructs that make up this application as well. So it's not a very busy application. It's like one tier, one VM, one IP member. We then have the flow analysis as well. From a flow perspective, we can, this is actually the machine learning element, right? So from this perspective, uh, the discovery is happening on an ongoing basis, and what it's giving us is actually the confidence markers. So the confidence level means that Network Insight thinks that this MCM app, irrespective of its names, uh, has a high there is a high confidence level that this is an application with 2 tiers and 2 VMs, right? And we can then click on expand and then save this application. And once we save this application, it will actually land into this in this applications section where we saw, the HR app. So that's how the HR app was created as well. We have the ability to sort it out by confidence level. We can actually look at we can configure the granularity, from a coarse, medium to fine as well. We can actually stop the discovery as well, right? Or stop the discovery altogether. So there are multiple options that, we can actually uh, uh, enhance and modify from a machine learning configuration perspective as well. We then have the names as well. So in your lab, we follow a naming convention. So basically, what we do is we create a regular expression. What we do is we have an option to create a naming convention. We create a pattern, and sometimes creating patterns could be difficult. So what we have is we have a regular expression pattern builder inside, that exists inside Network Insight. So where it says one in front of this, it will bring up the full inventory of all the VMs that we have, right? Um, and that's how we are able to make a full context of regular expressions. And once we click on discover, and again that is in an exercise in your lab, in this module 2, those items will actually show up similar to what you saw in the flow, right? So those applications would actually show up here, which will then give us the ability to save those applications should we, where we see fit, or we have a use case, or we are trying to understand that application and its behavior with other applications that exist in the application section. So that gives us, that is module 2. So it is all about application discovery, application behavior, identifying those applications. It takes you through that process, right? So the next topic I wanted to cover as part of this guided lab was, if I go back to my table of contents, and shrink this and go into network assurance and verification, is basically what network assurance and verification is, right? So it basically looks at all the switches that are configured in your environment. So if I click on the home button by clicking on vRealize Network Insight home button, it takes me to this landing page, which we will always see once you log into Network Insight. In this case, when we start the lab, it shows the lab status. It says that open the browser. So again, thinking about that modular nature of the lab, it's taking you through the steps. So what I then do is I click on network map, and when I click on the network map, this basically shows me the entire network map, um, um, in terms of the switches that are configured as data sources in Network Insight. And from that, we can then expedite the network assurance and verification use cases, right? So in this case, the my network map is loading. So I can see that there are 30 switches that are available. I can see that there are 157 routers, there are 9 firewalls configured, there's one load balancer, and then I can see the transport nodes from an NSX perspective, and there are some other entities as well at the same time. So what we have here is a full network map of these different uh, attributes that are grouped together to form network functions that may be in different geographies or different locations, right? So we then have the sections which talks about the alerts, talks about the entities, it talks about the paths. So following this guide, it basically says that we need to zoom out. So we are in a zoom out view right now, and then our focus is going to be this, which is the production PR backbone. So when I click on the production backbone, um, it actually brings up, zooms it up automatically for me, and if it doesn't, we can always obviously press this. So I click on this entity to understand what's this layer 3 switch, which is BB New York NY2, basically what it is. And then I can click on the entity details, and I can actually explore that what is happening with my switch. So it's bringing me all of that telemetry and view in terms of the problems that may be associated to the switch. For example, in this case, native VLAN has a mismatch. And what that means is that I can view those entity details, and that is basically, what is actually mentioned in the in the lab manual as well. I then go into the critical events. So if I click on, the critical events, it shows me the critical events that exist in this uh, enterprise. And whenever I use the term enterprise, it means all the data sources that are configured against Network Insight, right? So that's what it means. Just waiting for it to load. And once we go there, we can actually, in this view, we can actually see that, it's showing us all the possible, problems that are in this section. I can click on show more as well and explore. uh, so there are some extra bits that I'm showing you which are not really mentioned in the actual manual as well, because it's a guided workshop. The idea is that we just need to make it more interactive, so it's still loading actually. But what we then do is we close this, and what I then do is I click on the switches. So when I click on the switches, it loads up the number of switches that that are configured in this ecosystem. And once it loads up, I can see all of my switches. And what we do is we apply a filter where we're looking for an NVDS NSX V switch, and that then shows us the type of information that we can filter. And we can actually click on each of that switch as well to bring in more richer set or the telemetry, right? So that's where that's the idea. um, then we move into the next step where we have the alert section, right? So the alerts is basically the problem section, right? Where are the problems that we need to fix? um, then we have, and we see, it's actually a cumulative view of all the alerts that we see, instead of going into each section, which is critical, warning, moderate. It is one place. We can also search for alerts as well, right? So in the lab example, we do actually pick up a alert which is link MTU mismatch, so I'm not going into that. We then have the entities as well. So from an entities perspective, we can actually search for different entities to make sense of that information. So just going to the entities so I can pull up the right example for you. So here I'm going to actually click on bb hyphen ny, and what it should do is it should populate uh, the search for me automatically and show me the results, right? So anything with that type. So basically we're passing in some syntax so that it forms the regular expression, right? So we can see that this bb hyphen New York 1 is there. I can then click on bb hyphen New York 1 to see what type of information it brings back. Still loading. And the use case is that we go in and explore and say that show me the details for the Ethernet 10, right? So what is happening in Ethernet 10 as an example, which is from that perspective. So if I go into the manual, uh, in terms of following everything, it brings up the interface 10, which is the Ethernet 10, to bring that detail around it. What we can then do is we can actually monitor paths as well. So I can type in the paths from source to destination, and then I can see that where those communication paths are blocked as well. So in this case, if I go here, you can see that I type in the panorama F5 demo to an iperf gateway, and then I click on the advanced options. And as a result of that, what will happen is that I'll be able to see all the paths. In this case, there are 8 paths, and we can then explore that why that path is blocked. So sometime the challenge is that my communication is not happening from A to B, from VM1 to VM2, or from physical server 1 to virtual server, or physical to physical. So here we, as long as these switches are configured and we have the view, we are able to establish that what is blocking what, right? So in this case, we are going into the path one, and then we expand this, and we can actually then look into the detail that what is happening on each of the interface, and details around it, right? So that's the network assurance and verification element. So it decouples and demystify all the network challenges or problems you may be having in an enterprise, because in any enterprise, when you once you rack and stack the network infrastructure, the only thing that keeps on changing is actually the routing or the switching element, right? And then sometime the firewalls are introduced, and then it becomes really really difficult to unravel everything, or as other calls it, peeling the onion. So I hope this was useful. So you may now uh, be able to carry on the lab. And thank you so much for joining.